Today I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Joe Paz. He was born in Peru, moved to the States at a very young age, and then he went back to Peru, which is where we met. Now, how good do you think Joe's English is? Based on what I just told you, do you think he is a native English speaker or is he a very fluent English speaker, perhaps like myself? If you want to find that out, stick around till the end of this episode. You are going to really enjoy it. I think you are going to especially appreciate it if you are living in an English-speaking country, because that means that you've gone through the same kind of experience that Joe has. But even if you don't live in an English-speaking country, you're still going to relate to Joe's journey of learning and facing language challenges, and perhaps this element as well of culture absorption, because there's a lot of that when we learn another language. By the way, Joe and I used some advanced words in this conversation, like the ones you see here, and to help you learn them, I've put together a PDF guide with all the definitions, the full transcript, as well as the main insights and takeaways from this episode. So if you want it, you can download it with the link in the description below. Now, get ready for the fascinating story about language learning, adapting to new cultures, and overcoming challenges. You will love this. Let's dive right in. All right, English hero, I'm here with a very good friend of mine, Joe Paz. I am pumped to have you on the show, man.
Yo, man, likewise. Thank you. Thank you for having me, man.
Awesome, Joe. I'll let you introduce yourself here in a second. I just want to set the stage here with the key facts about yourself. You were born in Peru, then you moved with your family to the United States, to New York City, and then as an adult, you went back to Peru, and that is when we crossed paths, basically. Tons to unpack just from that overview of your journey. We'll get to that later on in our chat. For now, let's just start with the basics. So, Joe, why don't you let our audience know a little bit more about yourself, where you currently live, what languages you speak, anything that you'd like to share.
Cool, man. Thank you. So my name is Joseph Paz. You know, everybody that's named Joseph, we call them Joe, right? And basically, well, I'm an online and in-person strength trainer. I own a gym here in Córdoba, Argentina, right? I live in a small village. Yeah, man, I've been doing a lot of language learning, right? But not English. As you can tell, I speak fluent English. I don't have an accent. That's because I grew up, or I lived most of my life in New York, a year or so when I was very young in New Jersey. And then and I appreciate that background picture you have there of Times Square and those New York City cabs. Yeah, man.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah. So where do we begin, man? Where do we begin? I guess we could start when what happened, what brought my family to the United States.
Yeah, man, we'll get to that. And I am very curious about what life was like growing up in New York. Just to give the audience a little bit more like context about the circumstance that we met. I was in Peru, and I just told everybody that you went to Peru and that's where we met.
Right.
And I just wanted to start with a story which for me is pretty cool looking back, and all these years have passed, but still pretty fresh. And I just wanted to get your thoughts or your side of this story there.
Sure, sure.
It's the year 2013, right? You're walking around downtown Tacna, which is the southernmost city in Peru, and you overhear two guys speaking English. And what do you do next? Tell me your side of the story.
All right. So yeah, man, I was heading towards the movie theater, and I walk past. I overhear two individuals speaking English very well, like so well that I literally thought I'm over here crossing some Americans, right? So I hear you guys talking. I look back, And immediately I walk up to you and I'm like, yo, where you guys from, man? Right? I don't know if you remember that. Of course you
I
do.
do, of course, yeah.
Um, and yeah, and when I found out one of you was from Belgium and you were from Argentina, I was like, wow, these guys speak great English. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think in Belgium they teach them both like French and English. I'm not sure if that's, but yeah,
I'm pretty sure like Belgium ranks pretty high in terms of like the countries where they speak English really well, like together with the Netherlands, Finland, those countries. Yeah, Stefan. His name was Stefan, and he spoke English very well as many other languages. He was a polyglot.
oh wow, man, I didn't know that. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, so that right there, man, we broke ice and I guess we decided to link after, man. That was cool.
Yeah, definitely. We instantly made you part of our group, and like my side of the story there, how I got to that place, to that moment in time, in that place in Tacna. So I was hanging out with this Belgium guy who had come to Peru on an exchange program himself, albeit a different exchange program than the one I was in. He was just starting to learn Spanish, and so we spoke in English between us, right? And yeah, so I was part of this exchange program. I was in a house together with other people from Argentina and like Bolivia. Yeah,
Yes.
it was just two students from Bolivia and a couple more students from Argentina. One of them, Maria, she came from Cordoba, and you guys meet, start dating, and to make a really long and beautiful story short, fast forward to now, you guys are married, you live in Cordoba, you have a kid now. And so, I just wanted to start with that kind of like big perspective of, it's pretty awesome how everything has played out. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
anyway, man, it's great. So let's start with, what life was like for you as a Peruvian, being born in Peru, but as
Yeah.
a very little kid. Remind me, how old were you when you went to New York City?
Well, I was like, I didn't even have a year yet when I was already in, yeah. So very, very young, man. Like I really, I never deny I'm Peruvian, but I don't feel as one. I don't know if I'm expressing myself correctly. I don't feel like a genuine Peruvian. You get me?
100%. I totally get you because I feel the
Right.
same way. Only my situation is compacted within Argentina because I was born in Rosario, same city where
Okay.
Messi was born.
Right. Right.
Uh, Probably lived there a couple of weeks, moved to another city, to Cordoba, then moved to another city, Tucumán. But the
Right.
fact that I
Right.
moved around so much, I never really attached my identity to one single place.
Right.
And like for you must be the same, only we're talking about countries and like completely different parts of the world. So it's even more
Absolutely.
fascinating. So tell me, Joe, where did you move in New York City? And yeah, basically what was life growing up there as an individual with South American roots? What was it all like?
Yeah, man. Well, to me, it was pretty natural because, like, as far as I can remember, I was just there. I lived in Queens, which is one of the five boroughs, right? In Queens for most of my life until about around maybe 11, 12 years old when I moved to Nassau County. Okay, so this is kind of complex. We call it Long Island, but if you look at it geographically, Queens is on Long Island,
Yeah.
but we
Hmm.
don't we don't say we're from Long Island. We say we're from Queens. So it's just I guess it's just street talk, man. But um I basically moved to Nassau County, which is not one of the five boroughs. And we don't consider that city, but we're like 20 minutes away from the city. And yeah, growing up, man, it's very diverse. So you just feel kind of comfortable, normal. I guess I'm fortunate. There you go. I guess I'm fortunate enough to grow up with different nationalities and ethnicities around me, man. Indians, Asians, you name it, bro. I mean, it's New York City, so African Americans in Queens, a lot of Asians, man, a lot of Asians, Hispanics too. So it was just pretty normal. It was kind of rough too because everybody thinks, oh, it's United States, it's America. But New York City, man, is it's a jungle, man. It's a concrete jungle, is what they say. So you have to be very wise and learn how to move in the streets because I wasn't growing up in an affluent area, middle class, living in neighborhoods that I guess weren't so safe. But I love it, man. I can't deny it. I loved it. I loved everything I learned. And yeah, man. That
That's fascinating, man. And I guess, as you mentioned, street life and living there as a South American, you got to learn a lot of different things and a different perspective on things and being in such a diverse place. That must have been fascinating. Did your mother like speak English to you? Did she choose to speak Spanish to you? What was it like?
No, my mother learned English throughout the years. So she went like very bravely to United States with zero to no English, and I was accustomed to hearing Spanish. I lived with my cousins and stuff like that. They already spoke English, so I guess I was like absorbing both languages at the same time because I really don't remember having to learn English. Like I just I could just remember speaking it. I don't remember having to go to an extra or a special class to learn it. So she spoke to me in Spanish. So when you have foreigners come to United States and live, from in the United States from another country, let's say a Spanish speaking country or an Asian speaking country, who knows? And they have to go to school, right? So the schools have a special class. It's called ESL,
Yeah.
where they teach you English apart from every other course you have to learn, or every other, you know what I mean. You have to learn history, math, and everything else. So I never had to do ESL. I just
Okay.
remembered. I just remember speaking English. Like I just spoke it. It's like how we grow up. Like my son, he's just gonna know how to speak English because I speak to him English all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm sure it's the same with your son too.
I do speak English to him. Yeah, that's true. So well, you absorb Spanish, like little bits of it, and but you grow up speaking English, and
Yeah.
that's your first language. English is your
Yeah.
first language, but you do have this like very like important influence of the Spanish language through your mom, and basically like yeah, through your identity as well, I would say too, right? Like, and I guess you've always been had like a very special curiosity about Spanish as a language, but also like the place where you came from.
Sure, yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. When I was younger, not so much, but as I got older, and I realized that there's much more to my family, to my history than just me living in the United States. Yeah, man, I got curious. I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't like put so much effort to learning Spanish. I just
Hmm.
spoke the basics, like "Hola, ¿cómo estás?
No
Bien,
worries,
mucho
man.
gusto." When I went to Peru, bro, I had terrible Spanish language dominance, I guess you would say. It was terrible, and I would just speak short, quick answers. You feel me? Like I couldn't have a long conversation like we're having now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that is interesting too, because there are as many different like ways to learn a language as there are people basically, and as well as methods and different ways to approach the different like language challenges that you encounter. I always think of like exposure, the level of exposure that you have in your target language. You had that since early age with your mother, with culture itself, with, I don't know, maybe TV even. From an early age, you were exposed to the language. So there are two things there: high exposure and the advantage of young age. So we have two factors that at play that are in your favor. Then there's the element of dedication, which are telling me you didn't really have a lot of dedication for it. You just absorbed it. You did it in an organic way.
Sure.
Did not really do anything like out of your way to study, like to study the grammar, to read up on these textbooks. And despite not having this dedication, that probably the dedication that I had for learning English, like my journey was completely different. I did not live or grow up in the United States or in an English speaking country, but I was able to kind of like offset that with a much higher level of dedication. And
Absolutely.
and it's fascinating for me to see like two people like I've heard you speaking Spanish and it's really good. And it's very interesting to me like how you arrived to that level and how I arrived to my level of English and how
Right.
different our journeys look. And
Right.
and because there are like these different factors or parameters can play in different ways, but it depends on really like how they are set. Like again, learning since an early age and with a high level of exposure, that gave you an advantage to later be able to say, okay, I'm not going to really dedicate myself too much to learning the language,
Right.
but still I'm enjoying this advantage, right?
Sure. Yeah, man. I mean, I guess it's just because I lived it, like I'm living it. It's just it's natural, it's day to day. It's it's how you communicate, it's how you get from your house to school, it's how you tell your teacher you need to go to the bathroom. It's just second nature. I mean, it's not something you really think about. Now, if you ask me about Spanish, no, that's another story. When I decided to open up a gym in Peru, I have to communicate. I have to get my message across. So there's a factor of survival and success. Therefore, there is no room to slack off on this. Like I have to learn and I have to speak and I have to listen and absorb and replicate what I hear. And I would literally sometimes, I still do, go online and read a word or hear a phrase that I don't understand and look it up and think how I could apply it to my day to day or how I could use it in the future. And that's how you learn or that's how you get better speaking any language. And that's what I did for Spanish, man. Um, I also wanted to communicate better with my wife because I when I met her, some things I literally had to go and translate. Right, I would write it in English, translate it, and have her read it, and that's not ideal, man. I didn't want to live my life like that.
That's highly impractical, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, can you imagine? So that's how I went about it, man. I just I said, you know what, I'm gonna learn it, and that's it.
Yeah. You touched there on you mentioned the word survival, which is great because if you're living in the country where the language is spoken, there is like just a whole new level of need, necessity for you to speak the language and to function in that place. And, that's actually an excellent segue to the next question here that I have in my outline, which is about your Spanish speaking challenges that you face in Argentina, in Cordoba, Argentina. As I said before, I've heard you speaking Spanish, and I would rate your Spanish speaking skills as like really high. That said, as someone who speaks English really well myself, I still struggle in many different ways when I have to communicate every day in English. I would assume that you do too,
Of
especially
course.
in your situation, living with your spouse, speaking Spanish all the time, right? She doesn't speak English. Maria doesn't
No,
speak English, right? Um,
but she sure does understand it.
oh, she does by now.
Yeah, she
That's good to
understands a
hear.
lot. She understands a lot. Yeah.
Little sideway here. I'll decide if I keep this or not in the episode later. In my previous podcast episode with Matt, he introduced me to this concept of crosstalk. And it's this like, imagine yourself with your wife, Maria. She speaks in Spanish to you, but you speak back to her in English. Have you ever experimented or played around doing that? Because it'll
Yeah.
be a situation where, she takes advantage of her higher under or like listening comprehension and the fact that she can understand English, but maybe her speaking skills are not there to match her listening skills. And same thing
Right.
with you, although your Spanish speaking skills are great. Have you ever tried that? Have you ever like played around doing that at all?
We have, but it lasted about like what 15 minutes, and then it was
Yeah.
just like, okay, let's get back to how things work. I guess we're
Yeah,
just
for sure.
trying to deal with that stress, but I think it's a bad idea. I think we should deal with the stress because it's a good it's a good skill to have to learn English, man. I mean,
Hmm.
nowadays in this global market, learning English is a plus.
So, Joe, let's just go back then to the initial question about your challenges speaking Spanish in Argentina. How do you deal with these Spanish speaking challenges?
Sure. So Argentina, you do have like a few words that are different, I guess, from how Peruvians would say certain things. Argentinians like to joke, I guess more. They're more of so they have certain phrases and jokes that you really need to know like the language or maybe in the culture too, because sometimes like you start thinking like, wait, what? Like, you don't get the joke and you're just like you're sitting there like, okay, I feel like an idiot because I should know this. I'm speaking Spanish, I live out here. But I mean, it's sometimes it gets hard, it gets a little difficult, but I guess I just stick to like being honest and asking them, listen, I have no idea what you just said. Can you explain it to me? Right? And I think people appreciate the honesty and they may look at me because I look 100% Hispanic. Like I look like I should know Hispanic, like I know the back of my hand, but I don't. So it's like they kind of look at me like, is this guy kidding me? But that's what it is, man. Like when they hear me speaking English, then they'll be like, then they realize like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand why. But I guess yeah, it gets a little difficult sometimes, but it's manageable.
And I feel you, man. Jokes are a different animal. It's got a lot of like culture. We have this common knowledge of our culture or like situation. I guess a lot of the English heroes out there listening to this would relate with that. And when you get to a level where you can actually understand a joke or understand this like the double meaning or the even like the pun in the phrasing, you kind of like think, wow, I just understood this. This is really hard to get unless you've, gained the experience, not just language wise and skill wise and vocabulary wise, but also that kind of like more in-depth cultural background
Right.
that there's no way someone can teach you that. You just have to observe it, right? You have to just spend time with the language and the culture, and those two things together like give you that ability to get the joke, find the humor in it, and yeah, just continue with the conversation with the situation like as if you were part of it and not someone like you just trying to understand what's being said.
You just got to get accustomed to it. I'm sorry. I mean, you just got to get accustomed to it. I guess live what the common Argentinian is living so that little by little, you could be like, oh, okay, I know what you mean. Right.
So, Joe, awesome. It's been great talking to you so far. And I have, came up with a couple questions here that I'm really curious about your answer. As someone who's lived in, we're talking about one continent here, but these are completely different parts of the world. Like, especially when we talk about the US and South America, there's less of a difference between Peru and Argentina, but still it's
Right.
pretty big, I would say, like myself having lived in both countries. What's something that you miss from each of these countries? Like even Argentina, just imagine that you were to move to a different country, right? Like what's something that you would miss from Argentina? What's something that you miss from the US and from Peru right now? Love to hear about that. So let's start with the US, with New York, maybe if it's particular to that place.
Sure.
What's something that living now in Argentina you miss from the US?
From the US, man, I miss, I guess I would say that I miss the bright lights, the big city, the feeling you get when you're in Manhattan in particular. Every time I would go to Manhattan, I just I don't know, man. I would just get this vibe I can't explain. And the pizza, of course. I miss the pizza. Best pizza
Oh,
in the world.
pizza.
Yes. Yes, best pizza in the world, man.
You live in a pretty small town in Cordoba, right? So
It's,
it's just a crazy contrast there with
it is.
Manhattan and where you're living right now, which is a very peaceful, nice little town.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that I guess I'm living in this village and it matches where I'm at in my life. Like I'm at a point in my life where I search for peace. Like I want that this kind of tranquility and I'm not so active anymore. I like doing things that aren't so fun, I guess, to the common person, right? So I don't know, man. It just fits for now.
And that's deep and philosophical too. Yeah, definitely worth like just reflecting more on. And I'm sure that you've done your fair share of reflection about that, but that's interesting. So I've seen that you've been to Buenos Aires.
Right.
Anything that you kind of like made you reminisce of New York when you went to Buenos Aires? Like, you know what I mean?
Sort of, sort of. I mean, I guess some neighborhoods of Buenos Aires did remind me of some of the neighborhoods that you can find in New York. But they are very different, man. It's very different, totally different. I guess one thing that I can say is that Buenos Aires has a lot of trees and a lot of green areas, which is sort of mimics what Manhattan, I guess, in a certain area has. Um, but very busy. It's very busy, and yeah, it's sort of like every big city, man. Like every big city.
Hmm. Yeah, like it provides that difference, right? Like from where you're living right now in that town, then going to Buenos Aires, and it's that big jump of such a vibrant city, similar to what New York is, but there are huge differences too about like things like architecture and culture too, and people and things like that. Yeah. And so what's something from Peru that you miss?
You know what? I like. I'm not the only one, man. I love Peruvian food. Not all of the Peruvian food, but a lot of particular dishes that they do have. I miss that.
I've been to Peru too, and I can attest to that. Like Peruvian
Yeah,
food is off the charts. It's amazing. It's amazing for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it ranks like really at the top, like top 10 countries for sure, as far as a list. If like a chef came up with a list of countries, they'll definitely put Peru in the top 10.
for
Um,
sure.
Beautiful. And if you moved to a different place and you no longer lived in Argentina, is there anything that you would miss from it? And maybe you want to be careful what you say because you are living in Argentina. You don't want your anyone there.
No, man, I like Argentina, man. I can't lie to you, man. I like it. I obviously, if the economy can, get better and God willingly it will. Um, but as far as that, man, the people are very warm people. Um, and I can't complain. I can't complain out here. As soon as I got out here and I opened up my gym, I didn't have to wait very long for my gym to be known and to have lots of clients. And so I can't complain. They're very very open and very very warm people. So I would miss that about the people, man. Yeah. And I like a lot of the food, the way they eat. I like steaks and all of that stuff. I'm all for it. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, and the peace that I have here, man, I don't know. I don't know if I could find it anywhere else, to be honest with you.
That's very cool, man. Well, it's been great chatting with you. We're not wrapping up just now, but you did mention your gym. What would be a place that they can find more about what you do, Joe?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, man. I'm on Instagram and I'm going to be posting a lot more valuable content so that if you are interested in losing some pounds, gaining some muscle, and doing it in an intelligent and sustainable manner, I will help you.
Let me say this to my audience of English hearers out there. If you are looking to get more fluent and fit, Joe is your guy. Because I'm sure, Joe, you're willing to coach them in English, right?
Sure, why not? Of course. And it's a lot easier for me to push you to talk some crap, okay? And get you amped up, man. English is my language. In Spanish, I sound a little funny doing it. That's what they say. So they asked me if I could just curse at them in English, and I'm all for it, man.
Yeah, man, that's the kind of tough love that you need if you want to get
Sure.
more fit and also fluent. Because, I think I always find myself like using all these metaphors from the gym, like the proverbial lifting weights, really like, or like going through pain. Yeah. So check out Joe's Instagram page, which uh it's Forza, right? That's how you pronounce it.
Forza, well, yeah,
Forza.
Forza Club or Club, right? Spanish speakers are going to be listening to it, so this is Forza with two Z's Club, and I'm gonna probably be changing that name soon.
Yeah, so I'm gonna leave the link in the description of this. If you, I'm gonna be looking out for that name change if that happens, Joe. So I'll update the link when that happens. So yeah, English hero, embrace your heroic self. If you wanna get fit, especially and fluent, Joe is your guy, definitely. I've been following you, Joe, on Instagram for all these many years, and I've always find your stuff great, both in the like inspirational aspect and also like in the more technical, more like the quality of your advice. So yeah, definitely recommend. Joe, so it's been really fun talking to you. I wanted to land the plane here with a final thought, a final question. Questions lead, answers follow. Based on what we've discussed, what's like a question that you would ask the listener who wants to accelerate their English fluency goals? What would that question be, Joe?
How bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? Right? This is what I ask my clients. You want to lose weight? Okay. Why? How bad do you want it? Is it something that you're willing to give up sleep for? Is it something you're willing to sacrifice some time for? How bad do you want it?
Love that. And I love that it's so applicable to fitness, to fluency, to anything, any goals that you want to achieve. And I saw you posted an image with the quote like, the pain of discipline is not as bad as the pain of regretting. Like, right? You don't like
Yes,
you get older and you look back in your life and you feel like, oh, I could have done so much more. And that regret must be
terrible.
terrible. Yeah. Joe, I heard another quote. The definition of hell is you're at the end of your life and you meet the person that you could have become. And that hit me when I heard that. Discussed it in a previous episode. You meeting the person that you could have become.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Good stuff.
Joe, really appreciate you taking the time today to sit here with me,
No, cool, man.
talk about life, talk about English, talk about your journey, which is fascinating. I'm sure that listeners out there have had a blast listening to you. So thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much for having me, and it was a pleasure.
All right, English Hero, I hope that you enjoyed that chat with Joe Paz. I've always been quite intrigued and curious about what life is like for someone growing up in a different country. That was Joe's experience. And I think, when you go through that, even though I haven't done that myself, it must give you a pretty unique perspective on a variety of things, like language learning, adapting to a new culture, and overall overcoming challenges. Anyway, if you want to revisit any of the points that Joe and I have discussed in this podcast, you can download the free PDF that comes with this episode. You are going to find the link in the description below. And with that said, I just want to once again thank you for tuning in and being a part of this wonderful heroic English community. And if you've enjoyed this episode on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, And if you've listened to this on a podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, give us a 5-star review in one of those platforms. That would be extremely beneficial for the podcast. So I would be forever grateful if you did that. Also, hit follow while you're at it, right? So, as always, English hero, keep learning, keep growing, keep living your English, and until next time.